The sun had just begun to peek through the dusty curtains of a small, quiet house, tucked in the corner of a peaceful town. The old wooden floors creaked softly as the elderly woman moved slowly, carrying a tray with a cup of tea. Her hands were worn and wrinkled, the kind of hands that told stories of a life full of work, love, and quiet moments spent with music. She moved carefully, her eyes catching the morning light that made the old piano in the corner of the living room shine with a gentle glow. It had been years since anyone besides her and her family had heard her play. The piano had always been her companion, a place where her thoughts could spill freely and her emotions could find a voice. Her neighbors often saw her sitting by the window, fingers hovering above the keys, humming softly to herself. To them, she was just the sweet old lady of the street, always greeting everyone with a warm smile and a wave. They knew she loved music, but no one realized the depth of her talent. People assumed she played only simple tunes or familiar songs that everyone knew. In reality, she could play pieces that many professional musicians struggled to master. It was a secret she held close to her heart, not out of shame, but out of love for the purity of the music itself. One ordinary morning, a letter arrived that would change everything. The envelope was crisp and official, the kind of thing that immediately made her curious and slightly nervous. She sat down at her kitchen table, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. The handwriting was elegant, and the words inside invited her to appear on a live television show. The invitation was polite but carried a hint of urgency. They wanted her to come to the studio, meet the host, and participate in a segment that promised fun and entertainment. At first, she was unsure. She had never been on television, and the idea of being in front of bright lights and cameras made her heart race. But she also felt a spark of curiosity. Perhaps it would be fun, she thought. Perhaps it would be a new adventure, something to break the quiet rhythm of her days. She decided to call the number on the letter, and after a polite conversation filled with reassurances and friendly voices on the other end, she agreed to go. They said it would be simple, lighthearted, and nothing to worry about. The next few days were a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. She tried to imagine herself on a stage in front of an audience, the sound of her piano filling the room. She practiced a little each day, not knowing exactly what they expected her to play. She dusted off her favorite sheet music and sat at the piano, her fingers finding their familiar places on the keys. The notes felt comforting under her touch, a reminder that music had always been her voice when words failed. Meanwhile, back at the television studio, the producers and staff were preparing for what they thought would be a funny segment. They had seen her photo and read the brief background they had received. In their minds, they imagined a sweet old lady, a bit timid, maybe even clumsy, someone who would entertain the audience with nervous smiles and awkward pauses. They had planned the jokes carefully, the teasing remarks, the camera angles that would make her look small and unsure. It was all meant to be lighthearted, but the intent was clear. This was supposed to be humorous at her expense. The woman arrived at the studio on the morning of the recording, guided through busy corridors filled with flashing lights and bustling staff. The sounds of cameras being adjusted, microphones tested, and footsteps echoing through the large space made her pulse quicken. She felt a mix of awe and unease. The host greeted her with a broad, practiced smile, shaking her hand warmly. His words were kind, but she could sense the subtle undercurrent of expectation, the kind that comes when someone is ready to make you the center of a joke. They led her to the stage where a grand piano stood, polished and gleaming under the bright studio lights. The audience was already seated, a sea of eager faces waiting for the show to begin. She could hear the murmurs and the occasional laugh, and a wave of nervousness swept over her. She had never performed in front of so many people before, not like this. Her fingers brushed the keys lightly, feeling the smooth surface and recalling every note she had learned over the years. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that music had always been her safe place, her secret world where she felt confident and free. The host stepped forward, making a few remarks about how cute it was to have an elderly guest and teasing her gently about her ability to play. The audience chuckled, some clapping politely, others laughing softly at the idea that an old lady might struggle with the piano. The woman smiled politely, nodding her head, trying to ease the tension. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what she was about to do. She knew that this moment, small as it seemed, was her chance to speak through her music. As the camera zoomed in on her hands, She felt a strange mix of vulnerability and strength. Her fingers hovered over the keys, poised and ready. The lights seemed to brighten around her, and for a moment the noise of the studio faded into the background. She thought of all the evenings spent at this piano, the quiet moments when she played for no one, the times when the music had comforted her in loneliness or celebrated the simple joys of life. She reminded herself that the audience did not know her story, but they would hear her voice through the piano. The host made one last comment, a teasing joke meant to elicit laughter, and the audience responded with a mix of chuckles and polite applause. The woman nodded gently, a small smile playing on her lips. Then she pressed the first key, a single note that rang clear and true. It was soft, tentative at first, as if testing the waters, but as her fingers moved, the melody began to take shape. The notes flowed effortlessly, weaving a pattern that was both delicate and powerful. Her years of practice, hidden talent, and deep love for music revealed themselves in every chord. The audience, expecting a comical performance, grew silent. The laughter faded, replaced by a growing sense of awe. Cameras shifted, capturing faces of astonishment, the host's expression changing from smug amusement to shock. The music seemed to fill every corner of the studio, enveloping the room in a warmth and beauty that no one had anticipated. Each note told a story, conveying emotions that words could never fully express. It was a performance that demanded attention, respect, and admiration. The woman's hands moved with grace and precision, each chord resonating with the experience of a lifetime. She played not to impress, not to prove herself, but because this was her truth, her voice. She lost herself in the music, unaware of the camera angles, the audience, or the host's growing disbelief. In this moment, she was not an elderly woman on a TV show. She was a musician, a storyteller, a force of nature that could not be contained by expectation or prejudice. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then a wave of applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than any laughter that had preceded it. The audience clapped, cheered, and some even stood in awe, realizing that what they had witnessed was something extraordinary. The host, usually so confident and in control, looked genuinely stunned, struggling to find words. The producers exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that their planned joke had completely backfired. The woman, however, remained composed, smiling softly, her eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. She had shared her gift, and it had spoken louder than any introduction or explanation could. That day, a quiet life intersected with a world of millions. An ordinary morning in a small house had led to a moment that would ripple far beyond the studio. The elderly woman had stepped into the spotlight, not for fame or recognition, but for the love of music that had carried her through decades. And in doing so, she stunned the world, proving that true talent cannot be underestimated and that sometimes the most unexpected people can shine the brightest. After the performance, the elderly woman stepped off the stage feeling a strange mix of relief and calm. Her hands still tingled from the energy of the music, and her heart beat a little faster than usual. She had shared something precious, something that had been hers for decades, and now it had touched hundreds of people she did not even know. Backstage, the crew and host were whispering in disbelief, their earlier smirks replaced by awe. The producers, who had thought this would be a funny segment, now realized that the laughter they expected had been replaced by genuine admiration. The host, always quick with jokes, approached her cautiously. He hesitated, then said, I didn't expect that. That was incredible. His words were sincere, and for the first time she felt he truly meant them. She smiled gently and thanked him quietly without arrogance. There was no need to boast. The music had spoken for her. The crew began to gather around, asking questions, trying to capture every detail of what had just happened. Cameras that had been rolling for jokes were now recording awe and amazement. Word of her performance spread quickly within the studio. The director called the social media team, and within hours, short clips of her playing had appeared online. Viewers from across the country were stunned. Comments poured in, praising her talent, her poise, and the unexpected beauty of her performance. Many shared the video with friends and family, marveling at how a quiet, elderly woman could hold an entire audience spellbound with her music. People were amazed, not just by her skill, but by the emotion she conveyed through each note. She had taken a simple piano performance and turned it into a story that everyone could feel. The elderly woman returned home that evening, still carrying the quiet energy of her music. Her house felt both familiar and different. Every corner seemed to hum with the memory of the stage and the audience's reaction. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the piano, lightly touching the keys, almost as if checking to see if the magic was still there. It was. The notes flowed just as smoothly as before, but now there was a new understanding of how her music could reach people far beyond the walls of her living room. She smiled softly, thinking of all the faces she had seen that day, of the surprised gasps and applause, and of the realization that she had done something extraordinary without even trying to seek attention. The next morning brought a wave of messages and calls from journalists, local TV stations, and even national outlets. They wanted interviews, stories, and explanations. Many wanted to know how she had learned to play with such skill, and if she had always dreamed of performing for a larger audience. She was overwhelmed but composed. She answered politely, always emphasizing her love for music rather than the sudden fame. For her, the music was never about recognition. It had always been a private world of comfort, expression, and joy. The sudden attention was both thrilling and intimidating, but she managed to navigate it with humility, answering questions thoughtfully and never exaggerating her own abilities. Meanwhile, the live TV segment that had been intended as a joke sparked a larger conversation online. People criticized the show for attempting to make fun of her age, for underestimating her, and for assuming that someone older could not possess extraordinary talent. The elderly woman became a symbol of dignity, grace, and the idea that talent has no age limit. Viewers admired not only her skill, but also the way she handled the situation with calm and kindness. Memes and clips celebrating her performance began to circulate, not in mockery, but in respect. People from different walks of life found inspiration in her story, some commenting that it reminded them to never judge someone by their appearance or age. The woman's family, who had known the depth of her talent all along, were both proud and amazed. They had watched her grow up playing the piano, seeing her practice late into the night, and had always admired her dedication. But even they were not prepared for the impact of her performance. They celebrated privately, knowing that her music had finally reached the wider world. Her grandchildren in particular were in awe, watching clips online and seeing the admiration of thousands of strangers. They realized, for the first time, just how extraordinary their grandmother really was. Back at the studio, the producers were reflecting on what had happened. Their attempt at humor had turned into a lesson in respect and humility. They realized that underestimating someone, especially someone with quiet confidence and hidden skills, could backfire in the most surprising way. They began planning a follow-up segment, not as a joke but to celebrate her talent, to acknowledge their misjudgment, and to highlight the story of someone whose life had been dedicated to music. Even the host, usually quick with sarcasm, began to speak differently about the elderly woman. He praised her openly on camera, acknowledging the unexpected brilliance of her performance. As the days went by, invitations started arriving from concert halls, music schools, and community centers. People wanted her to perform, to teach, and to share her story. Each invitation was met with quiet consideration. She was not seeking fame, but she also understood that her music could inspire others. She decided to accept some invitations not for recognition, but to encourage young musicians and remind people that passion and dedication could flourish at any age. Her performances became more than just music. They were lessons in courage, perseverance, and the quiet power of self-expression. Her life slowly transformed, but in subtle ways. She continued her daily routines, visiting the local market, greeting neighbors, and tending to her small garden. But now she also prepared for performances, read letters from fans, and shared stories of her experiences. She noticed how people treated her differently, not with mockery but with respect and admiration. Children would stop to listen when she played in public spaces, and adults would often pause, mesmerized by her music. She never expected this, yet she accepted it with grace. Every evening, after a day filled with interviews, preparations, or small performances, she would return to her piano at home. It remained her sanctuary, the place where music began and ended each day. She would sit quietly, letting the notes flow without thought of applause or attention. In those moments, she felt the same joy she had felt as a young girl, discovering new pieces, experimenting with melodies, and losing herself in the music. Fame had not changed the way she played. It had only added a new layer of meaning, a new audience that could feel the depth of her heart through her fingers. The elderly woman became a quiet sensation, known for her unexpected brilliance and her humility. But more importantly, she became a symbol. She reminded everyone that age does not limit talent, that true skill cannot be faked, and that respect should always come before judgment. Her story spread across social media, news outlets, and conversations everywhere. People began to share their own stories of hidden talents, of overlooked abilities, and of lessons learned from underestimating others. She had sparked more than admiration. She had sparked reflection. Even as the attention continued, she remained grounded. She valued the simple things in life: a cup of tea by the piano, a walk in the garden, the laughter of family. She had stepped into the spotlight, but she never let it change who she was. Her music, her love for it, and her quiet determination remained the core of her identity. She understood that what mattered most was not the applause or the recognition, but the way music connected people, moved hearts, and bridged gaps between generations. And so, life continued now with a gentle hum of excitement. The elderly woman walked through her days with quiet pride, sharing her gift when it mattered, inspiring others to find their voice, and reminding the world that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones who have lived quietly, passionately, and without expectation. She had been invited to play on live television as a joke, but seconds after her first note, she had done something much greater. She had reminded everyone that true talent, quiet confidence, and a lifetime of dedication could never be underestimated. The days after the television show became a whirlwind of excitement and new experiences for the elderly woman. Her quiet life, once filled with the soft rhythm of routine, now included interviews, messages from strangers, and invitations that she had never imagined. She took everything slowly, wanting to enjoy each moment without feeling rushed or overwhelmed. She reminded herself constantly that her music was the heart of her life, and that nothing else should overshadow the joy it brought. One morning, she received an invitation from a local music school. They had seen the video of her performance and were eager for her to come and meet the students. They did not want her to perform as a spectacle, but to inspire, to share her knowledge, and to show that talent and dedication could come at any age. She was hesitant at first, unsure if she was ready to step into a classroom full of young musicians, yet there was a spark of excitement too. Perhaps this was an opportunity to pass on what she had learned in all those years of practice and study. The day she arrived at the music school, she was greeted with warm smiles and eager faces. Students, some shy and some boldly curious, gathered around as she walked into the room. The walls were lined with pianos, posters of famous composers, and the faint scent of old sheet music. The elderly woman felt a wave of nostalgia. This environment reminded her of the first time she had touched a piano, learning notes and rhythms that seemed magical at the time. Now she would be the one passing on that magic. She began by speaking softly, sharing a few words about her own journey with music. She told them about the hours of practice, the mistakes she had made, and the moments of quiet triumph when a piece finally sounded right. The students listened intently, some leaning forward in their chairs, others closing their eyes as if they could feel the music even before it started. She explained that music was not about speed or applause. It was about emotion, understanding, and connection. Every note had a story, and every piece of music was a conversation between the musician and the listener. Then, she sat at the grand piano in the center of the room. Her fingers touched the keys lightly at first, as if greeting old friends. The students watched in awe as she played a piece that was both complex and moving. Her music was not about showmanship. It was about feeling. Every note seemed to float through the air, wrapping around each listener, creating a connection that transcended age and experience. Some students whispered to each other in astonishment, unable to believe that someone so elderly could play with such mastery and emotion. After she finished, the room was silent for a moment, filled only with the echo of the last notes. Then applause broke out, gentle at first, then growing louder. She smiled, not with pride but with quiet satisfaction. She had shared something meaningful, and it had touched people deeply. The students, inspired by her performance, asked questions about technique, practice, and her favorite pieces. She answered patiently, offering advice and encouragement, making them understand that learning music was a journey, not a race. Over the next few weeks, she visited more schools, small concert halls, and community centers. Each time she carried herself with humility and grace, focusing on the students and audience rather than herself. She noticed that people were not just impressed by her skill, but by her approach to music and life. They admired her dedication, her calm confidence, and the way she could transform nerves and hesitation into something beautiful. She became a quiet mentor, inspiring many to pursue music and to never let age or doubt stop them from following their passions. Back at home, her life continued with a balance of routine and new opportunities. She would wake early, enjoy a quiet breakfast, and spend time practicing or composing new pieces. She found that teaching and performing in public spaces gave her music a new dimension. The joy of seeing students light up with understanding, or hearing applause from an audience who had not expected anything, filled her with a quiet satisfaction. She still enjoyed her solitary moments, sitting by the piano in the morning sun, feeling the keys beneath her fingers and letting her mind wander through melodies. One afternoon, she received an unexpected phone call. A national television network had seen her viral performance and wanted to feature her in a special program. They did not want to make fun of her or create a joke. They wanted to tell her story, to celebrate her talent, and to explore how someone with years of hidden skill could suddenly capture the world's attention. She was nervous but intrigued. It was another step into the unknown, yet she felt ready. This was not about fame. It was about sharing her music and inspiring others. The program was scheduled for a weekend, and she spent the week preparing in her quiet way. She chose pieces that were meaningful to her, ones that told stories of love, loss, and joy. She wanted every note to carry emotion, to reach people not just through technical skill but through feeling. When the day arrived, she was guided through the busy studio, bright lights casting long shadows, cameras moving silently to capture every moment. The host, this time genuinely respectful, welcomed her warmly, speaking about her viral performance and the impact it had made. The audience seemed attentive, curious, and ready to be moved rather than entertained at her expense. As she sat at the piano, she could feel the collective anticipation of everyone in the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the energy around her settle. Then she began to play. The first notes floated into the studio, gentle but deliberate, carrying a sense of calm and purpose. The audience leaned in, silent, as the music built and transformed the space. Her fingers moved gracefully, each chord and passage conveying emotion and meaning. It was a performance that transcended the expectations of viewers, musicians, and hosts alike. The music told a story of resilience, of hidden talent, and of a lifetime of dedication. The audience, initially unsure of what to expect, was soon captivated. Eyes widened, mouths opened in surprise, and some people held their breath as the music wove a spell. The camera panned across faces, capturing expressions of awe, admiration, and emotion. Even the crew behind the scenes watched quietly, realizing that they were witnessing something rare and extraordinary. The performance lasted longer than anyone anticipated, each piece flowing seamlessly into the next until finally, she lifted her hands and let the last note linger in the air. For a brief moment, there was complete silence. Then the room erupted in applause, cheers, and whistles of appreciation. The host smiled, visibly moved, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was not just a performance, it was a gift." She nodded, smiling softly, feeling the warmth of the audience's admiration, but keeping her humility intact. She had played not to impress, not to win applause, but because music had always been her voice. The recognition was a byproduct, not the purpose. The national program aired her story, and once again her video spread across social media and news outlets. Millions watched her play, millions commented, and millions were inspired. Teachers shared her story with students. Older musicians felt encouraged, and young viewers learned that passion and skill could grow quietly for years, only to emerge when the time was right. She had become more than a musician. She had become a symbol of perseverance, talent, and quiet dignity. Life continued, but it was richer, more vibrant, and full of new possibilities. She balanced public appearances, interviews, and teaching with her personal time at home. Her music grew in depth and emotion, influenced by her experiences, sharing it with the world. She discovered that inspiring others gave her music a new meaning, and that every performance, no matter how small, could touch lives in unexpected ways. The elderly woman had stepped onto a stage as a simple guest and had shown the world that talent cannot be measured by age, expectation, or appearances. She had not only stunned the audience once, but continued to inspire countless people with every note she played. After the national television program aired, The elderly woman's life changed in ways she had never imagined. The video of her performance had spread not only across her country, but also to other parts of the world. People sent letters, emails, and social media messages praising her skill and sharing how her music had inspired them. Some wrote that they had been struggling with age, self-doubt, or fear of failure, and seeing her play gave them courage to continue pursuing their own passions. She read the messages carefully, feeling touched by the depth of connection people experienced through her music. Her home, which had always been a sanctuary of quiet, now sometimes felt like a crossroads for visitors. Friends of friends, music enthusiasts, and curious strangers would come to hear her play. She welcomed them politely, often offering tea and conversation before sitting at the piano to share her music. Despite the attention, she never allowed herself to be distracted from the joy that playing brought her. She maintained her simple routines, waking early, preparing breakfast, tending to her small garden, and spending quiet hours at her piano, balancing her private life with the public attention she had received. One day, a representative from a large international music competition contacted her. They had seen her performances online and were interested in inviting her to participate, not as a novelty, but as a serious competitor in a special category for adult musicians. She hesitated, feeling both nervous and curious. She had never thought of herself in a competitive setting, yet the opportunity seemed to recognize her for her genuine talent, rather than for the viral fame she had gained. After careful thought, she accepted the invitation, hoping to inspire others and to challenge herself in a new way. As she prepared for the competition, she found herself reflecting on her life and her journey with music. She remembered the long hours she had spent at the piano, practicing alone, experimenting with melodies, and learning new techniques. She thought about the people who had encouraged her over the years, and those who had doubted her abilities. All of these experiences had shaped her, and now they gave her the strength to step confidently into the competition hall. She understood that success was not measured by medals or awards, but by the passion and effort she had put into her craft. The day of the competition arrived, and the elderly woman walked into the grand concert hall with quiet determination. The stage was large, the audience filled with people from around the world, and the atmosphere was electric. She could feel the collective anticipation, the weight of expectation, but she reminded herself to focus on the music, on the joy of playing, rather than on the nerves or the crowd. She had faced audiences before, but this felt different. This was a gathering of people who truly understood the language of music, who would listen carefully to each note and interpret the emotions behind them. When it was her turn to perform, she walked to the piano, her hands steady but her heart beating with excitement. She paused for a moment, allowing herself to breathe and to feel the energy of the room. Then she began. The first notes were soft, deliberate, and precise, creating a gentle rhythm that captured the attention of everyone present. As she continued, the music grew in complexity and emotion. Her fingers danced across the keys with fluidity, producing a harmony that was both powerful and delicate. Every note told a story, conveying feelings of joy, sadness, hope, and triumph. The audience listened in rapt attention, some closing their eyes to fully immerse themselves in the music, others leaning forward in silent admiration. The elderly woman played as if the piano were an extension of her soul, each piece unfolding naturally and beautifully. The judges, experienced musicians themselves, were impressed not only by her technical skill but by the emotional depth of her performance. She had taken something personal, something quiet and intimate, and shared it with the world in a way that moved every listener. When she finished, the hall was silent for a moment, as if no one could find the right words to respond. Then the applause began, soft at first, growing into a standing ovation that echoed through the hall. She smiled gently, acknowledging the audience, feeling gratitude for the opportunity to connect through music. Following the performance, the judges praised her wholeheartedly. They spoke of her mastery of the instrument, her ability to convey emotion, and her unique approach to each piece. She listened quietly, thankful for their recognition but never seeking it. Her satisfaction came from the music itself, the experience of sharing it, and the connections she had formed along the way. The competition had given her a new platform, but it had not changed her essence. She remained humble, grounded, and focused on the joy of playing. The international exposure brought new invitations, including opportunities to perform at charity events, music workshops, and cultural gatherings. She used these moments to inspire others, particularly young musicians, reminding them that age, background, or circumstances should never limit their dreams. She encouraged students to practice diligently, to listen carefully, and to find their own voice within the music. She also emphasized that music was not only about skill, but about understanding and expressing emotion, making it a personal and transformative experience. Throughout these experiences, she remained deeply connected to her community. She continued to visit her neighbors, offer support to friends, and maintain the routines that grounded her. Even as her reputation grew, she never lost sight of the simple pleasures in life. A warm cup of tea, the sound of birds in her garden, the feel of sunlight on her face. These moments reminded her that while recognition was rewarding, it was the quiet, everyday experiences that gave her music its true depth and meaning. The elderly woman also began to mentor other musicians, not only teaching technique but also sharing lessons about resilience, patience, and self-belief. She encouraged those who had faced setbacks or doubted their abilities to continue pursuing their passions. She shared her own story, emphasizing that talent could flourish quietly for years before being recognized, and that persistence, dedication, and love for the craft were far more important than immediate success or attention. As months passed, she noticed a profound change in how people perceived talent and age. Her story inspired conversations, workshops, and community initiatives focused on lifelong learning and creativity. People began to appreciate that wisdom, experience, and dedication could produce extraordinary results regardless of age. The elderly woman became more than a musician. She became a symbol of perseverance, humility, and the power of following one's passion. Despite the growing attention and opportunities, she always returned to her piano at home. It remained her sanctuary, the place where she could explore new compositions, reflect on her journey, and connect deeply with her emotions. Each day she played with the same quiet joy and dedication that had defined her early years. Her music had become a bridge between her private life and the wider world, allowing her to inspire and connect without losing herself in the process. Through all these experiences, she learned that true success was not measured by fame, awards, or recognition, but by the impact she had on others and the fulfillment she found in her craft. She had started as a quiet, unassuming musician, underestimated and overlooked, yet her talent and dedication had transformed her life and touched countless others. Her story became a reminder that extraordinary abilities can remain hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to shine, and that the simplest acts of courage, like sharing one's true self, can inspire and change the world. The elderly woman's life had grown rich with experiences she had never imagined possible. From the quiet corners of her home to the grand stages of concert halls, her music had touched countless hearts. Yet through it all, she remained humble, grounded, and deeply connected to the simple joys that had always been her foundation. Her morning still began with a warm cup of tea and the soft sunlight filtering through her window. Her afternoons were spent at the piano, exploring melodies and letting her emotions flow freely through each note. And her evenings often included walks in the garden, tending to her flowers and feeling the quiet rhythm of life. Despite her growing fame, she never allowed herself to be swept away by attention. Interviews, television appearances, and invitations to perform were all opportunities to share her gift, not to seek validation. She understood that the true power of music lay not in applause but in connection, the way a melody could speak directly to the heart, convey unspoken emotions, and bring people together. She cherished every moment she had to play, whether in front of a large audience or alone in her living room. One day she received an invitation that both surprised and delighted her. A music academy, dedicated to teaching young musicians from underserved communities, had asked her to lead a special workshop. They wanted her to inspire students who had never had access to quality music education, to show them that talent could emerge from unexpected places, and to remind them that dedication and passion were more important than resources or opportunity. She accepted immediately, feeling that this was exactly the kind of work she had hoped to do. The day of the workshop arrived, and she walked into a room filled with eager young faces, some nervous, some bold, all curious. The students had heard stories of her performances online, and were excited to meet someone whose music had touched so many lives. She greeted them with warmth, her voice gentle yet confident. She shared her own journey, speaking about years of quiet practice, moments of doubt, and the joy that music had brought her through every stage of life. She emphasized that music was not only about playing notes correctly, but about expressing feelings, understanding the story behind each piece, and connecting with the listener. Then she sat at the piano and played. The room seemed to hold its breath as her fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, producing a melody that was both powerful and delicate. The students watched in awe, some unable to believe that someone so elderly could play with such precision and emotion. The music seemed to speak directly to them, carrying lessons of patience, resilience, and the beauty of quiet dedication. After finishing, she encouraged each student to come forward, try the keys, and explore their own creativity. She guided them gently, showing them techniques, offering encouragement, and sharing insights from her decades of experience. As the workshop continued, she noticed how much joy it brought her to see the students light up with understanding and confidence. Each question they asked, each attempt they made, reminded her of her own beginnings, the first time she had discovered the piano, and the thrill of creating music that felt alive. She realized that teaching was another form of sharing her gift, a way to extend her music beyond herself and create a lasting impact. She felt a quiet fulfillment, knowing that these young musicians would carry a piece of her passion with them. After the workshop, she returned home, her mind full of melodies and memories. She reflected on how much her life had changed since the television appearance that had started it all. A simple act of playing music shared without expectation had opened doors, touched hearts, and inspired countless people. She understood that the true value of her talent was not in fame or recognition, but in the way it could uplift others and create connections that transcended age, background, or circumstance. In the following months, she continued to balance public engagements with private moments of reflection and practice. She played at small community events, larger concerts, and charitable gatherings, always focusing on the music and the emotions it conveyed. People who heard her speak often remarked on her humility, her wisdom, and the way she made even the most complex pieces feel accessible and meaningful. She became a role model, not only for her skill but for the grace and generosity with which she shared it. At home, she found solace in routine and in the quiet spaces where music had always been her companion. She composed new pieces, experimented with different styles, and reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She occasionally read the messages and letters from people who had been inspired by her performances. Many described life-changing experiences, renewed courage, or a newfound appreciation for music. These words touched her deeply, reinforcing the idea that music was a gift meant to be shared, not hoarded. One evening, as she sat by her piano, she thought about how unexpected this journey had been. She had been invited to play on live television as a joke, underestimated and overlooked, yet that single moment had transformed her life. What was meant to be humorous had become a platform for inspiration, connection, and celebration of talent. She understood that the world often misjudges people, overlooking potential and assuming limitations, and she felt grateful to have had the chance to prove that true skill and passion could not be confined by expectations. Her story began to inspire others beyond music. People shared it in classrooms, at community gatherings, and in social media discussions, highlighting lessons about perseverance, humility, and the courage to pursue one's passions regardless of age or circumstance. She became a quiet symbol of hope and inspiration, demonstrating that a lifetime of dedication could lead to extraordinary moments, even when recognition seemed unlikely. Her life was a testament to the idea that extraordinary people often live quietly, practicing and perfecting their craft until the world finally takes notice. Despite the growing attention and accolades, she remained deeply connected to the simple joys of everyday life. She spent mornings tending her garden, afternoons at her piano, and evenings enjoying tea and conversation with family and friends. She continued to walk through her neighborhood, greeting neighbors and sharing small acts of kindness. Fame had not changed her essence. It had only allowed her to extend her reach, to touch more lives, and to inspire more people than she had ever imagined. In time, she was invited to give lectures, write about her experiences, and mentor other musicians on a broader scale. She approached each opportunity with the same humility and dedication that had defined her from the beginning. She never sought attention for herself, only the chance to share the power of music, to encourage others to find their voice, and to remind people that true talent cannot be measured by age, appearance, or circumstance. The elderly woman had transformed from a quiet, unassuming musician into a beloved figure whose life and work inspired countless individuals. Yet she remained herself, a person who loved music for its own sake, who valued connection and expression, and who understood that the most important achievements were not measured in applause or awards, but in the lives she touched and the joy she brought through her art. She had stepped into the spotlight as a guest on a television show, and in doing so, she had reminded the world of a timeless truth. Passion, skill, and dedication can shine at any age, and the simplest acts of courage can leave a lasting, profound impact. As she sat at her piano in the quiet evening, the last light of the day streaming through the window, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every note she played carried a story, a memory, and a piece of her heart. She smiled softly, knowing that her music had reached far beyond her own life, touching others, inspiring them, and creating a legacy of beauty, courage, and hope. In the end, she realized that her greatest triumph was not the recognition, the invitations, or the performances, but the ability to remain true to herself, to her music, and to the quiet power that lay within her all along.